Audio Jungle.
I never pay for him.
Is his name on the back of the jersey? Absolutely not. No.
Obviously, these are shy.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fifth episode of the Back to the Bogies podcast. I'm joined today by a special guest, co-host in Rory Devlin.
Well, I've done it before. I've been here before.
Mm-hmm.
You were off in Prague, Krakow, one of the two.
One of the two, off Gallivantum. But yeah, no better man to lead in or fill in for Sean Quinn while he's off doing his side quests. But today we're joined by Gerry Farrell.
Hey, folks.
So, Gerry, can I have a little introduction into yourself? And yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. I'm one of the Bohemian FC historians. I have a background in, it's not my day job, but I have a background in history and research. I've written a lot of stuff for the Bows match program, the Ireland match programs. I'm currently, and have been for quite a while, writing a history book about Bows, especially Bows in Europe. And look, it's a passion of mine, and it's something I've continually researching, and big nerd really. He's a terrible football player, so I think I'm overcompensating by going, learning more about, what happened in the Leinster Senior Cup final in 1903 or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, all about that because we
Absolutely. I definitely know the answer to that one. But look, everyone know you can get the gist of it, football historian. But what is a football historian?
Well, for example, what I do with Bows is that I do tours of Daily Mount. We get an awful lot of correspondence from people going, right, my grandfather played for Bows in 1946. Can you find any information about him? So there's all that sort of stuff about, and there's great other people involved. Stephen Burke, who's a mine information, Kieran Priestley, people like that. But they want to know more. They want to see maybe a photograph of a family member, stats. That's the kind of obvious stuff. But then what really interests me is about how football as a social pastime, as an activity, reaches out into other sections of society, whether that's, politics or, wider society, revolutionary periods, major conflict. And in this case, you have the church and religion, which is obviously very connected here in Ireland, in Dublin. We're only down the road from Archbishop John Charles McQuaid. We might mention him later.
Yeah.
Things like that. So I think you could tell a great story through football as a little window into that society, because, there's a great quote from a guy called Arthur Hopcroft, who wrote a book called The Football Man in the 1960s. And he basically said, right, everyone has to get up. They eat, they sleep, you go to work. So the only thing that people choose to do more than play or watch football is pray. And I don't even know if that's true because that was 60 years ago. But, it is one of the most mass social phenomenons in the world. So to ignore it doesn't make sense. It actually makes a lot more sense to say, do you know what can football tell us about this? Because if you get thousands of people going to something every week across the country constantly for years, as people have said before, sometimes your relationship with your football club is the longest lasting relationship in your life, because it'll often outlive, your relationship with your parents or even with your spouse or whoever it might be. You can be a fan from the time you're 5 to you're 95. Yeah. So there's a lot to learn, I think, from it. Well, I would say that. I'm biased. I'm football, sorry.
And how does one become a football historian? Like I'm not saying maybe you fell into it or you really wanted to be one, but what attracted you to it?
Well, I studied history for my leaving cert. I studied ancient history in university. I did a master's in media studies, but then what I chose to do in media studies was how you represent ancient history in film and cinema and TV and things like that. So I've always had a passion for it. And at the same time, I just for better or worse, I have a good memory and head for stats and things like that. So I was one of those kids who poured over every Rothman's football annual and Shoot magazines. And, I constantly got, for birthday or Christmas, got a football book. So I just, I was one of the things going, oh, well, who won the League Cup in 96-7 QPR? Okay, yeah, all that stuff.
Of course, yeah, of course, right. Yeah.
So great for a pub quiz.
Yeah, great. I am good for a pub quiz, I'll give you that. But then what happened, I suppose, more and more was that as I became more and more involved with Bows and volunteering, I kept meeting people who had these great stories about, themselves, maybe often they're ex-players or ex-administrators or, their family members. And there's such a rich story. My own dad had played for Bows in the 60s, so he just had these great stories, including an amazing one about the professionalism of Bows and 10 lads downstairs in the hut getting, scuttered drunk, which I might tell later on if you want.
We've taken up that band. So it's Fismer now, not Bows, but yeah.
And all these great stories, all these really rich stories, and all the different players he played with. So he would have played with like Willie Brown, who was an Irish international. He was still an amateur, up until Joey Lapierre, the last amateur to play for Ireland. And I don't really think you should count Joey Lapierre, but anyway. And all these great stories. So just that sparked so many interest in me, and that there's such a rich story. And then I realized especially older folks, you kind of have to record this sort of stuff while they're still with us and those memories are still clear. And then just, it's a rabbit hole. Every time you read something, you think you know everything. You go, actually, no, there's more. Actually, no, there's more. And that's just what's really interested me now. And it's kind of become a little, turned from a hobby into kind of now a proper sideline where I do kind of tours and write articles and different things like that.
Great. And even like, yeah, so like this is going to lead into like, what would be your first connection with Bohemians then? So through your dad, I guess. But
sure, my dad, yeah. Like, so my dad's uncle, Tommy Kieran, was vice president of Bohs. He passed away, obviously, a good number of years ago now, but he was vice president for years. He was a linesman the day we played Arsenal when the floodlights were switched on. You know, he was a league round referee for many years as well until he punched Sam Prohl's son in the face and various other things. Long story.
Yeah.
And then obviously my dad playing there. So the first game I remember going to was the 92 Cup final, which gave me a very false impression of what it's like to be a Bohs fan. Because I thought, oh, this is great. We win trophies and everyone's happy. And, you know, it wasn't like that.
Brought back down to earth then soon after.
But like 33 years ago, nearly now, I'm still here. So going, I was a season ticket holder. Then when times got really bad around 2010, I became a member. Because I thought, look, we have to, you know, change the club and we have to buy into it to keep the, because it did look like we were going to go bang, really, 2011, 2012. And then just I've become more and more involved. So I write for the match program, started doing bits and pieces, joined the Supporters Trust. And yeah, now I think it's a, you know, people don't really know. Oh, Gerry, he's the Bohs lad. Yeah, that's, and I'm sure you guys get that as well or something like that. So it's become part of my identity, whether for better or ill, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I know in preparation for the podcast, you did a little bit of research on our beloved UCFL.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the other UCL.
Yeah, the other
even though it's older than the Champions League. Yeah.
In my opinion, the better of the two.
Better standards.
But look, we've had board members of UCFL on. We all have our own stories about it. But you know, where did UCFL start? Like, where was the big bang?
Yeah, I suppose you really threw me a curveball here because I like to think there's very little that'll faze me to talk about something in Irish football. And you said, right, talk about the United Churches League. That's tough now. I don't know where I'm going to start with that. And my first kind of knowledge of United Churches League was the old Bohs supporters team used to play in the United Churches League. A couple of mates of mine were on that team back in, that's probably about 10, 12 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably would know maybe like the likes of Mark Keane or Stephen Walsh or people like that.
Yes,
part of that. Because that was my only kind of knowledge. I was like, oh, United Churches League, that's kind of an interesting name. I wonder where that came from. I never really thought more about it. Then you got in touch with me and said, you know, could you look into that? I was like, all right, I don't really know where to start, but I did. So the official start, although not the real start because it's a much older history, but the United Church League was founded in 1948.
Yes, that's one for the quiz.
Yes, and I sent you on a few bits.
Shout out to Jack Porter for getting that right.
And I think I sent you on a few clippings and bits and pieces.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of different celebrations, things that I had the first kind of list of board members there. I actually might read out some names.
Go for it.
And obviously they ended up having like an office on Dawson Street, but the first, and there's a great photograph here. There's a guy called Robert Watt, or Bobby Watt, as he sometimes mentioned. I actually wonder, is he any sort of relation to Robert Watt, who's the senior civil servant now, who was a former FAI board member, because Watt isn't that common as surname.
No.
I'd know a few Watts who are Bohs fans. If I can find it here now. Here we are. So the first kind of United Churches League officers. So the chairman was Mr. Robert Watts. Sorry, Watts plural. Or maybe it's actually Dylan Watts. Who knows?
Hopefully not.
The treasurer was E.R. Taylor. The honorary secretary was a D. Brophy. And because he's the honorary secretary, he's the guy who's in charge of correspondence. So he's given his home address, which he listed as in Colester. And there's committee members listed as Owens and Walker, and that they were going to have their next meeting in August. So that was kind of the first kind of committee I could find. So that's early 1949. I think I'd set you on, Rory, a kind of list of team sheets from 49, the league table. And I thought it was interesting.
That now. There's a few teams still going.
Really?
Whether or not in the Churches League is a different story, but there's definitely a few there that I recognise.
Yeah, but if you look at even that list, so you can see the title of it, so novice A and things like that. So these are all religious terms. So a novice is someone who's you're training for the priesthood, things like that. So top of the league is St. George's Athletic, the A team, and St. Mark's Athletic is one I wouldn't mind mentioning. They're in third place ahead of the YMCA. So St. Mark's Athletic. So there's St. Mark's is a Church of Ireland parish. So early, they're a much older club. So this is 1949, but St. Mark's are around 1906. And there's teams named after the main kind of Protestant Dublin dioceses. So if you know Colbrua Street there's a church there, which is the Church of St. George and St. Thomas. But if you know Eccles Street and next to Temple Street Hospital, that's St. George's Church, which I think now HSE offices, was a nightclub for a while in the 90s. It used to be the Temple Theatre.
Is that the one that's, well, it's normally when I walk by it's all closed off with barriers. Is that the same place?
Yeah, it's big, tall, thin kind of
looks like a Greek place.
Yeah.
Someone dropped in Dublin.
Exactly, yeah. So same guy who designed that, Francis Johnson, designed the GPO, for example.
Oh.
But that was a parish St. George, and then they combined because the Protestant community in inner city Dublin shrank.
Yeah.
But all these teams, took names of those parishes. St. Mark's Athletic or St. Mark's Parish. There was St. Werbridge Parish, which is, if you know, was next to the original Burdocks, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all taking their name from that. YMCA, obviously Young Men's Christian Association. They're an ex-League of Ireland team. They play in the first ever League of Ireland fixture, which is in Dandyman Park. Always play YMCA. They went 5-1, I think. The first goal ever in League of Ireland history. This is obviously after the split from Belfast. It's scored by a guy called Frank Hain, both centre forward. So they have a long pedigree there, next League of Ireland team, things like that. So you were saying you recognise a few names there, Rory, as well?
Well, I'm just looking at it, I suppose, more in depth now. So there's 2 St. George's Athletic, A and B in the top division, and there's 2 YMCAs. So they're taking up quite literally 50% of the league. It's 2 clubs.
Jeez.
Larkview, of course, Larkview is still going strong. They do have 1 UCFL team, potentially more. I'm not too sure.
I think that's 2.
2, yeah. Bluebell, obviously still there. Now an LSL club, a big LSL club. What else did I see? I'm seeing some great names though. Like
Broadstone United were founded just up the road from us here. A group of lads who live next to the bus depot, and they used to just play street league, street ball, and they set up a team as well. So they're in there as well. And it was multi-denominational. One thing I'd like to mention, because one of the photographs, we were talking about Robert Watts. I have a photograph of him here playing for a Boys Brigade international team. So just to explain, some people might know what the Boys Brigade is. A lot of people might not. So the Boys Brigade were basically like a Boy Scout movement, but it was focused on young men and it had a religious element. So it was usually associated with, it set up in Glasgow, but usually associated with the Anglican Church here, the Church of Ireland. And I'll show you actually that there. I'll send this on to you as well, but you can see him there. So he's the guy with the ball at his feet in 1927.
Yeah.
So, and I'll tell you now exactly, that's a Boys Brigade team taking on Liverpool in 1927. So assume he's a young man there. Say he's probably in his early 20s.
Yeah.
1949 is the chairman, so he's probably in his maybe late 40s. So what the Boys Brigades were, it was like a Boy Scout movement, and it was all, to develop young men and teach them virtues and things like that, and to be honest and sober and sensible and all that sort of stuff. But they had a big focus on things like music, but especially sport.
Yeah.
And it starts in Glasgow in the late 19th century, becomes huge there, becomes huge in Ireland. I think globally now there's probably over 800,000 members. It's still going strong. A lot of prominent ex-Bows players were ex-Boys Brigade players. So the likes of Harry Willits, who was an early star for Bows and the kind of beat either side of the First World War and things like that, won the league title in 24 with Bows. They're very, very popular, and there's kind of a lot of Boys Brigade leagues, and it's even representative teams. So that's an Irish Boys Brigade team taking on an English Boys Brigade team, and a lot of those Boys Brigade teams, that's where kind of St. Mark's Athletic come from as well. So they're those players, and they move on from this kind of Boy Scout movement into adult life, and they form their own club. So they kind of first say up until from 1900 say the 1930s, they're massively important in developing football in Dublin, because if you think about it, and there's a great piece of research in this, the early days of football in Dublin, there wasn't really any religious divide. So roughly, broadly speaking, a quarter of the population of Dublin, kind of the turn of the 19th century to the 20th century, are Church of Ireland or Protestant faith, and that's roughly representative in the amount of people playing football. So it's not dominated by one creed or other. And obviously it's a very vibrant association culture within Dublin, and especially within, say, the Protestant community, Protestant churches. So the Churches League, a lot of those are literally associated with a church or with a church-based organisation, like a kind of society or community organisation that's associated with the church. So it's hugely important in the growth of that league. And I suppose it's interesting that they were already in existence through the 10s, teens, 20s. A lot of those guys, as young men, rejoined the First World War. Some of them didn't come back, obviously. But it's interesting, 1949, kind of post-Second World War, that's when they created the United Churches League. And it's still quite an important thing because I don't know, I think I said them on to you as well, Rory. There's a regular trip up to Belfast. So obviously, even after, partition, this is in the 50s and 60s, they're still going up to Belfast at a time, to play games and things like that. Because obviously there's people who maybe their church connection is probably more prominent in Belfast. If you're a Presbyterian or maybe a Methodist or something like that, you maybe have a bigger connection with people in Belfast. So there's a big community there, things like that.
Yeah.
And I noticed there was a piece in the Herald in 1998 celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Church League. And they had, different tournaments and events, but they had a big ecumenical service. So basically all the different churches that would have a religious service for, whether you're Catholic, Protestant, Church of Ireland, Presbyterian, Methodist, whatever you might be. Mm-hmm. There was a big service to mark the 50th anniversary of the league in the late 90s. So it still was a core part of it. You could tell me now that it is or it isn't. And I think most people probably just, it's a league to play in, it's a team to play in.
Yeah.
Those connections with religious organizations are probably long gone, or at least a lot diluted. But I don't know what you think yourselves. It's just,
did you have a religious angle when you created the club though?
Latin or Spanish religion. But just something that I suppose came to my mind when you're talking about, obviously, it was not half, but Protestant and a Catholic kind of divide in Dublin. Were the teams like that as well? Was it, you can only play for a Protestant team if you're Protestant and Catholic?
Generally not, no. Now, if you're very much associated with the church, then yeah. So I'll give you an example. Alex Stevenson, who was one of the kind of top Irish players from the kind of 30s into the 40s, and he actually continues playing after the Second World War. So he plays for a team called Dolphin, who were based in Dolphin's Barn. And he gets signed. He's actually the only Dubliner to win a league title with Glasgow Rangers. And then he's signed by Everton. He's in the great Everton team with Dixie Dean that wins a league title as well. He's this little guy. He's number 10. So he's kind of a scheming, tricky inside forward. And he's from up near, actually from North Strand. So he's up around the corner from, say, where Wes Hoolan is from. And in my head, a bit to see him, he's a bit like Wes Hoolan. He's that sort of attacking, small, slight player, but really skillful.
Yeah.
Now, he starts off in a team called St. Barnabas, which is a church that's no longer gone. It was a Protestant church up around North Strand. And it's interesting because his family, one side of his family are Italian and one side of his family are Scottish. And they're all from the printing trade. So the Stevensons are Scottish immigrants who started working the printing trade in Ireland. His mother's side of the family are the Capranis, who are Italian immigrants, who are again working the printing trade. That's obviously, I'd say, how they meet. So he has siblings who are raised as Catholics, and he has siblings who are raised in the Church of Ireland. So he's playing for a Church of Ireland team. His dad is involved in football. His dad's on FAI committees. Similarly as is Robert Watts, the guy we mentioned. He's on FAI junior committees, all that sort of stuff. So he's playing for that. And it's noticeable. He's signed by Rangers. His coach in Dolphin is a guy called Arthur Dixon. He's an Englishman. He's played for Rangers. They invite him back to join the coaching team there. And he obviously signs Alex Nolan. He's from the Church of Ireland faith. But going back to your original question, okay, if you're playing for a church team, it's from your parish and your parishioners. But from the research I've read, and people like Conor Curran have done great work on this, and a guy called Julian Clenney as well has done really interesting stuff. Generally not. Generally it's like there might be a weighting one way or the other. There might be slightly more Catholics or Protestants or whatever. But, you wouldn't know. Harry Willits, who I mentioned before, I interviewed his daughter, only passed away a couple of years ago. She was like 104 when she died. Amazing woman, Audrey Willits. And she was saying like her dad was not religious at all.
Yeah.
But he was not notionally Church of Ireland. And she told her he's on a roll of honour thing for serving World War I in St. Mulvey's Church. She never knew that. She said, actually, he never went to Mass. But, if you look at the census record, he's listed as Church of Ireland. But, he was playing for Bowls with lads who were, from Catholic background. He's the ex-World War I soldier. He's playing in the forward line with, the Robinson brothers are both in the IRA, which is quite a mix. So, I don't think there's any hard and fast divides. There are teams obviously associated with a specific church who, of course, they're probably going to be parishioners. That'll evolve over time. But most of the ones that are more loosely associated, I don't think they really care what, background you're from, what your religious background is. It's probably, as it always comes down to, are you a good football player? That trumps most things, really.
Yeah.
We don't have enough of them.
No, unfortunately not.
There's a few other teams, St. Mary's Athletic and St. Mary's FC as well, which I'm wondering, is it potentially St. Mary's Crumlin or if it's not, also St. Mary's Sanford. Potentially could be 1-2 there. I love that there's one called Sevilla Celtic. So obviously it hasn't been lost on people.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if that's Seville Place or a corruption there of,
Well, this would be a great, incorrect answer for me.
I
really hope it is now.
Maybe Seville. Someone's like came back from holidays in Spain.
That's
1949.
Sims for club of football. That's I
kind of hope
matters over fighting for Franco came back.
Why not? I'm sure it was an Irishman who set up. Oh, that's Bilbao, isn't it? Yeah, never mind.
Irish guys set up Racing Club Salamanca, who are now gone, but there was an Irish college in Salamanca in northern Spain. They founded it in the late 19th century.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah.
Clontarf Vikings, is that a homage to our roots, potentially?
I guess so. I mean, Battle of Clontarf.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Never know.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, I was saying, there's the whole religious football thing. The two things that kind of struck out for me, and bring it back to Bo. So, the guy who suggested the name Bohemians, this guy called Frank Whitaker, and you probably know yourselves what the foundation was. There are a lot of people who are medical students and civil service students and all that. They're all quite young. They're all late teens, very early 20s in one or two cases. Frank Whitaker is trained to be a doctor. He ends up being a doctor in the Mater Hospital just down the road from us. When he retires, he joins a religious brotherhood and he's Brother de Sal when he retires. So the guy who suggested the name Bohemians ends up joining a religious order when he retires. He never marries and becomes, Brother de Sal. One of our top centre forwards in the 20s, a guy called George Ebbs, was League of Ireland top scorer in the late 20s, early 30s, I think. He ends up joining the priesthood. He becomes the chaplain in Pentonville prison in England. So, he's chaplain when there's people on death row who are still being executed, things like that. And we actually had two brothers. So there was, in the 40s, the Morris family. There was 9 brothers. Loads of them joined the priesthood, but 2 of them, Paul and Frank, both played for Bows, and like decent Bows sides. And they were kind of top players in the League of Ireland, but they both joined the priesthood. And again, one thing, just going back to Conor Curran, you guys probably know about the famous game against Yugoslavia in Daily Met in 1955.
Yeah, I do know.
This is Yugoslavia. They're a communist country. There's this big furor because the Archbishop is very unhappy that we're playing them. So the long story short is we were supposed to play Yugoslavia in 1952. Archbishop John Charles McQuaid, friend of De Valera's, when he's a priest, he's one of the people who's consulted on the drafting of the 37 Constitution, all this sort of stuff. He basically says, no, you're not paying them. They're godless communists, and they locked up this, Cardinal Stepanach, this guy, they locked him up. It's terrible. Yeah, they locked him up because he was a collaborator with the Nazis, but, they don't kind of tend to focus on that. But anyway, 1955 comes around, the Yugoslavians are like, do you want a game? And Joe Wickham, who's former secretary of Bows, former player for Bows, is head of the FAI. He goes, yeah. And he doesn't consult the Archbishop. Cool. And John Charles McQuaid, who lives up the road in the Archbishop's Palace on Gymkhana Road, is very annoyed by this. And he tries to organise a boycott of the game. So RTE won't cover it for radio. So the main RTE broadcaster, a guy called Philip Green, he's a big Rovers fan, even though he's from Connacht Street. And there's a great headline, Reds make green turn yellow because he won't turn up. The Army band won't turn up to play the anthem, so they have to play the national anthem on a record. So vinyl endowment has a long history. There's a cordon of like Legion of Mary people being down communism outside. So still 22,000 people turn up for the game. Very good Yugoslavia side. They win 4-1. Liam Toohey of Shamrock Rovers makes his debut that day. So actually, there's probably more Catholics on their team than ours because a lot of them are Croatians, so they all come out and bless themselves going onto the pitch to godless communists. Anyway, McQuaid is very annoyed by this, and he kind of realised this is a big, 20,000 odd people turning up on a Wednesday afternoon before the floodlights, so, to see this game. So this is a big kind of like, a bit of dirt in his eye, that sort of thing. So he said, right, if we can't beat them, we have to join them. So obviously, as we know, a lot of teams have connections with religious orders. So like Stella Maris being a famous one. Stella Maris Star of the Sea, Our Lady Star of the Sea, who's founded by a priest. Belgrove, founded by a priest. So there's a lot of priests involved in all this sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But he basically says, right, all the young trendy priests, in the 1950s, get involved in your local soccer team, get on the board, become coaches, do all this sort of stuff. Because he said, right, if the Football Association in Ireland is, are like ignoring my advice, I want to get in, grassroots and start controlling it from a Catholic Church point of view. And Conor Curran went into the Catholic Archive, found a lot of this stuff in his recent book. And it's really fascinating that, this is a guy who had opinions on everything, on censorship, on books, on magazines, on music, on, cinema, and on football. So he was, wanted to control culture to an extent, all culture in Ireland. And, you can probably see actually a rise in kind of Catholic Church involvement of priests and brothers in soccer, even though we kind of always think that like the Christian brothers hating soccer and being all super into the GA and all this stuff, which is true. And my dad went to a Christian brothers school, experienced all that. But you've also conscious that soccer is a popular sport in the cities. he's got this 2 fingers from the FAI about playing a godless communist nation. You know, they played Spain the following months. Who were, nothing about them being under fascist dictatorship. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's funny that you say, like, the mix in the churches, like, within the league. Like, I remember when, like, my first, Adam as well, when we first met our uncle, who also played in the league.
Yes.
And he's now this man's well in the 70s, from Finglas, shout out Uncle Martin. But he's a funny lad, and he just came up to me and he's like, what division he's playing in? Said Churches League, and instantly just jumps up and he goes, Protestant League. And we were absolutely like the mist. You hadn't a clue what he was on about. But yeah, like, it's fascinating to hear all that now. It's like actually glue all together now. So yeah, unbelievable.
Obviously, it's much and much just now in this day and age. But obviously, it was, as you say, much more prominent back then. So it's nice to get a feel of at least the Churches League was never an issue.
Yeah,
it was always there for everybody.
I wonder if you got a couple of feisty little derbies as well, like. You would say, like, Protestant team against a Catholic team, rep like that, you know?
I think we could have retrospectively overplayed this sort of stuff, and maybe in the context of things like the troubles that came afterwards in the north and all that. But I'll give you one example. So Drumcondra, we used to play at Talcott Park, the original, tenants of Talcott Park. So before the Prowl family bought it in the 1950s, it was owned by a family called the Hunters, who are from Belfast, and they're Belfast Presbyterians. And the drums team in kind of the 30s and 40s, and even into the early 50s, kind of had a reputation of being, they're the Protestant team in Dublin. And they probably had maybe slightly more high profile players who were of the Church of Ireland faith background. But I certainly don't think that was the case. And even Andy Hunter, who was the chairman of drums at the time, he goes on record, he's calling for clemency for there's guys who are in because we always think, like, the trouble started in 1969, 1970. There was activity, put it that way, in the 30s, 40s and so on. And he's appealing for clemency for someone who's identified as an IRA volunteer, who's attacked an RUC man in the 30s, and he's appealing for clemency because he's up for the death penalty of that. So this is a Belfast Presbyterian who was a football club in Dublin appealing for the Stormont executive to take pity on this, IRA man. So we like to put people in nice little boxes, but you know yourself, life is far more complicated than that. And we like to say, they're Protestant, they're Catholic, and this and that. And like, I always wind people up, saying, the black, Bows used to wear red, but they put the black stripes in as a mark of sympathy for Queen Victoria dying in 1901. And like, I've heard that back from people. It's like, it's completely not true, but I also used to say that the red star they used to be on the jersey was because they were all communists. But again, that's not true. I don't think it is anyway.
You'd hope not. Okay, so we've chatted plenty about the UCFL and the origins and so on. But when I jump into some of the other works that you've done, is there any kind of big stories, or at least one that you found most interesting to do?
I love a lot of it is the bow sort of stuff. But one thing I'm quite pleased to have been involved in last year was getting the players who played the Olympics in 1924 and also played in the first home international against the USA in Daily Midget in 1924 recognised as full internationals again. Because a lot of those men died, believing they were full internationals, being up until the 1960s being credited as full internationals. Then the Olympic Games and those friendlies directly after were delisted and called amateur internationals. So they effectively weren't full cap holders. Now, what happened in the 1990s was basically FIFA said, we count because FIFA organised the football tournaments at the Olympics in 24 and 28 when Uruguay won it. And they say, look, we count them we organise those tournaments, we count them as full internationals. So if you ever look at Uruguay's jersey, they have 4 stars for the four world titles they won. The 2 Olympics at 24, 28, World Cup at 30, and the World Cup at 50. And we were the only nations who didn't recognise them as full caps. So like, we played friendlies against Estonia and USA. They count them as full internationals. But like, those players didn't. And it was amazing. It wasn't just myself. I was myself, Reardon, Gary Spain, Paul Lennon, a lot of other people in the FAI, Paul Cook and others were involved. Basically got those caps relisted. And the game we played against Hungary in Lansdowne Road there last summer, we had members of all the families, and including Charlie Harris as the trainer.
Do you remember that? I remember that, yeah.
And we had a reception for them on the pitch. And that was wonderful because, and amazingly, some of the children of those players were still alive. Like, they were in their 80s and 90s. They're still around and with us. And it meant an awful lot to them.
Yeah,
and what struck me as well is, like, it's amazing that so many of them, their families are still involved in football. So like Aoife Robinson, who was Bow's Women's National League team centre forward, she's now playing for Cork City. Her great uncle and great grandfather were 2 of those players, the Robinson brothers who play for Bohemians, Sam and Christie. So like, and she's still involved in football. There's a lad whose name's Casey now who's coming through at St. Pat's. You know, he's 5 generations on from Johnny Murray, who played for Bows, and then his son Johnny Murray also played for Shells, and amazing stuff. So all these families connected through football. That's really special. Hopefully trying to do something similar enough as a commemoration piece for at the upcoming Bows and Rovers game in Lansdowne as well.
Okay, yeah.
I won't talk too much.
Keep it on the
branch.
branch.
Hopefully, make sure it actually happens now.
Back to the Bogies exclusive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's and look, because you get to meet people who are involved or their families, and you see how important it is and how important football is to these people and their family and their lives and all that. And just like that club, we're in the hut now and we're looking across the road. You can see the floodlights from here.
Yeah.
That club is amazing. Like, I'm completely biased, obviously, but the richness of history of that club is unparalleled in Ireland, I think. It's truly amazing. And the people who are involved and what they did in their own lives, and just that you think you know every story, and then the more you dig in. So one that always sticks out to me is like Bow's first league title just over 100 years ago, 1924. Our captain is a guy called Billy Otto. There aren't that many Ottos in Ireland in 1924, right? So I look him up. There's only one Otto family in the 1911 census, and he's like a professor of German at UCD, and he's in his 60s. So and he's no kid, so it's like that's not anything to Billy Otto, right? Found out Billy Otto was born in Robben Island in a leper colony. If people know Robben Island, they might know it's where Nelson Mandela was put in prison for most of his life, or for 20 of his 27 years, whatever. So it's a leper colony. His father is a Afrikaner Dutch pharmacist who's basically treating people with leprosy. The family moves back to Cape Town. At 17, he joins the army. He gets sent to the Battle of the Somme. He's in the most devastating battle that the South African infantry ever fight. He's lucky to survive, but he's injured. He's sent back to England to convalesce. As he, recovers, he's convalesced. He joins the civil service. He gets posted to Dublin. Starts playing football. He marries a girl from Drumcondra. Becomes captain of Bows. So the first man to captain Bows for league title is a South African, and I'm going to say he's the first African-born player to captain a European team to a league title. So, and then he's captain when South African national team come play in Denmark, which is the dark. And look, you look at the players he's playing with. He's playing with, lads who are in Michael Collins' squad, or were, But the club president that year is Emmett Dalton, who's a former player who again was British Army, fought the Battle of the Somme, came back, became radicalised by the treatment of his family by British authorities here, joins the IRA, becomes deputy head of IRA training. Uses his British Army uniform and a stolen armoured car to basically come in and try and have a breakout of Sean McKeown in Mountjoy prison. And he's going in with his, hello, I'm a British Army officer. And let this prisoner go. And mad stuff. Ivor St. John Gogarty, who is a player for us, has this bright yellow Rolls Royce he used to break people out of Mountjoy prison. All this, just strands upon strands of stuff that you could go into, and there's always a Bows connection. The other book I thought writing was called Bohemian History of the 20th Century, because I basically posed the theory that every major event in world history, there's a Bows connection somewhere. I had both world wars, the 1916 Rising, Maoist revolution in China, you name it.
And there was.
There was former Bows player John Curtis was Bishop of Chongyang in China at the time of the Maoist Revolution, and then the Japanese invasion, and he was in a POW camp, and mad stuff.
I swear, we'll do everything but win a match.
How big of a whiteboard tape do you have to connect all the dots?
You know that Charlie from Always Sunny meme? Yeah.
let me tell you.
But look, I could talk. I literally could and have talked for hours on Bows, but it's that club. This area is so rich in history and so rich in kind of human stories and, tragic, flawed people, but fascinating people nonetheless,
I'm aware that you do some tours around the place as well, do you?
Yes. Actually, so Fizz Fest this year, I think is the 9th to the 11th of May.
It's a plug.
Yeah. And I will be doing a couple of tours of Daily Mount, and we're hopeful that we'd have a couple other talks. So one of the things we're going to do is myself and, you might know Brian McManus, who, does Brand New Retro.
Trying to say everything else from last year.
No, sorry. So Brian from Brand New Retro, myself and him did a talk before on non-football uses of Daily Man. So he does a focus on the gigs of Bob Marley, Thin Lizzy, the gigs that didn't happen, how we could have the Beach Boys and Beyonce playing the Daily Man but didn't. seriously, Destiny Child.
Imagine Beyonce on the jersey.
2001 Destiny Child were due to play there, and it just didn't happen. They played the point instead. But, Beyonce on the trauma end. You love it. And I was doing other stuff on, like, the other weird and wonderful, like, trapeze artists and Russian horse dancers and, some of the mad stuff, boxing matches that happen in there. So we'll be doing a talk on that, hopefully in the Bohemian. It's all just TBC. So keep an eye on the Fizz Fest program when it goes live. We're hopeful that we might do a few other talks there. So talks and tours all come up. They're definitely happening. But if, again, like every now and again, you might know John Bateson, who's...
No, I don't know John. No.
John's a Bows member, but he had a significant birthday last year and he asked me to do a version of that tour for him and about 20 other lads.
Okay.
And we did that around Fitzroy. So look, if anyone does want to get me to do that, I'm usually happy enough. If you get bored on a Saturday morning or something like that, happy to do it. Give me a shout.
Yeah, aren't we all about that?
Yeah.
Well, give me a tour.
Yeah.
Why not?
We'll throw a few quid into the Revolut or something just for that, that's some gone.
And look, there's 1,000 stories in there. And look, I am trying to write, Stephen Burke has probably written the definitive history of Bows. If it ever gets published, I don't know. But Stephen has forgotten more about Bows than anyone will ever know. So rather than try and do that, I've kind of, after our success in the run up to the Powick Games a couple of years back, we started writing a history of Bows in Europe, going back to like our continental tours in the 20s and 30s. And we were winning tournaments in Europe, in France and Belgium way back when. And I'm still writing that at the moment, but I've interviewed dozens of players, former managers, all that sort of stuff about those, and lots of fans as well. It's a great fan story. So hopefully, fingers crossed, if I ever get the finger out, I will finish that book in the next year or so and hopefully get it published. So,
absolutely, that's one to look out for.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Interested with that.
It's called We're Going Abroad, Story of Bows in Europe.
Hopefully we get some.
Yeah, hopefully
in the future. Yeah,
hopefully I get to add another chapter to
in your lifetime.
In my lifetime.
on Disney Club the football, maybe.
Yeah,
get it in there.
Oh.
We'll think about 3A first.
3A, yeah, and 3B.
And 3B, yeah.
And 3B, yeah. Are there any other kind of standout stories that you've worked on? Maybe Ireland going abroad, like Gaddafi I'm thinking of, for example, or anything like that?
Look, I mean, the tours are absolutely mental and amazing. Like, really, like the Bows tours, the Ireland tours, the League of Ireland tours. I mean, we did an event there to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the win over Soviet Union in 1974. And we had Paddy Mulligan, who, a lot of people were associated with Chelsea and Shamrock Rovers, but actually started his career at Bows under Sean Thomas, I think. But talked to Paddy about, the South American tours they went on, and Dunphy kind of wanted to have a go at Pinochet and basically saying, we should boycott the tour. And then someone got injured and Dunphy got called up and he kind of conveniently dropped his politics then and all that sort of stuff. So I'm amazed, like, the fact that we went on a tour of South America and wanted to go on a tour of Argentina in the middle of the Falklands War. There's some mental ones like that. There was always that story. Brian Kerr always tells a story that, what wars are you taking us to now, Brian? Because it was often him and Billy Young taking the League of Ireland teams, and they went to, Iraq and Libya and, different places. It's like the stories we got from some of the, Bows played team in Cyprus kind of not long after the Cypriot Civil War, and they basically, the aftermatch reception was in an Irish UN base with all the army soldiers, and just basically, I think it was £1 for a bottle of whiskey, and the lads all got absolutely sloshed. And then, who was it? Joe Burke, I think, gave his Bows jersey to someone as a memento. And then Rovers were playing a different Cypriot team the following week, and then they did the same thing in the army base. And Joe had managed to talk about, convince Billy Young that, I just lost my jersey, Billy. What happened? I must have lost in the flight. And it's, of course, hanging up in the bar in the mess tent. And Johnny Giles, whoever, I think was the Rovers manager at the time, going, I see there's a Bows jersey up there in the tanking. Yeah. So I think Joe ended up getting fined for that, for giving his Bows jersey to some soldier who was from Phibsborough or something like that. But just the wild stories. I mean, there's the stuff behind the Iron Curtain and the, being followed around by Stasi agents in Dresden. Just, they're so, like, you could talk for hours on Malika would, I think.
Sign a peace to send a League of Ireland team over to, a place of conflict,
Yeah.
Cheer one up.
Sort it out.
Look, I've done all that stuff a bit. Like, we were the last team to play Germany before the outbreak of war. We played them in Bremen in 1939 in May. Bows played the team of the Schleswig-Holstein battleship in 1937, which is the battleship that fires first shots of the Second World War in the shelling of Gdansk. So you literally had Nazis playing in Dalymount in 1937. Not something we should be too proud of, but we played a B team because they're playing Rovers the next week, but and we still beat them. So yeah, it's like just absolutely crazy stories. But it's fascinating. And I think it can tell you an awful lot about the wider society and culture and country at the time. I mean, the crackpots and inkblots games, which is the charity matches that were played there in the 50s to raise money for children's hospitals, and you had Brendan Behan dressed as Joseph Stalin trying to hang one of the boats person the crossbar and this mock pantomime thing, and it's absolutely kind of Keystone Cop stuff going on the pitch. It's it's surreal. It's like something from Flann O'Brien novel, and I think actually Miles Bryan, whatever you want to call him, did actually play in one of those games. So what a football stadium you say, oh, this is a Leach stadium, is the last Leach built crash barriers, and also the guy who wrote Swim Two Birds may have played there as well.
Yeah. Some pitch. Like, and you feel that as well, though, don't you? Like, sometimes, like, going into Bowes games, like, you just different gravy. Like, if I've heard of stories, and I've heard my great uncle paying for Bowes in Dalymount as well. Like, again, like exhibition games, not like proper like part of the team, but like playing games in Dalymount Park, and there's multiple evidence of that. Like back in the great Ant's home and all.
My grandfather, who my namesake, also Gerry Farrell, he played for a team called St. Saviour's. So we're from Dominic Street, if people know St. Saviour's Church. Now, people probably know St. Saviour's Boxing Club more so, but they did have a football club up until the 60s. My dad played for them as well. But there's a picture of him as captain playing in Dalymount in 1930. And again, going back to the church thing, that was a church team going back way to the 30s for inner city kids. And like, that's a big thing for me that, like, I played there in a charity match 2 years ago. So I'm now the third generation of my family to play in Dalymount. Now, I'm a shockingly bad footballer. I got on for 5 minutes at the end, but like, it still counts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I suppose a lot of the history can be brought back to Dalymount, given us like the home of Irish football, So whether it's with Bowes and or Ireland, I'm sure there's plenty of people that can say played at Dalymount.
Yeah, and all some of the greatest players in the world. I think there's 2 moments of Bowes history. Obviously, the founding the club, September 1890, and then the opening the ground, almost exactly 11 years later. They're the 2 pivotal moments, because Dalymount makes everything that happens after that possible. Yeah. So Dalymount really is just there's a couple of ratings around the pitch. They bring over Preston North End. That's a record attendance. That raises a bit of money. To bring over Glasgow South the following month, that breaks the additional attendance. That money is immediately back into development of the ground, and again and again. I mean, the first few years they have Sheffield United, Liverpool, Everton, Chelsea, all come over and play. And you could think all the way up to Pele and Beckenbauer and Van Basten and all these guys who played there. The greatest players in the world have played in that pitch.
Cardinal already, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mad.
And now we have Keith Buckley.
And
I love Keith Buckley, don't worry.
And maybe Lynn Moose, actually.
Yeah, we'll see.
At the time of recording, that was a possibility. I don't know how that's gone.
Yeah. I don't think there's been any more developments. Yeah. We'll find out next week or a week after, I suppose.
More exclusives on the podcast.
Well, look, Gerry, thanks very much for coming on. I mean, we've got more knowledge there than probably we ever could have hoped for or dreamt of. And obviously with the whole Yugoslavia roots and everything like that, and Bowes being involved in any sort of war you can think of or any sort of moment in history, it's great. And then also obviously the main bit being the United Churches League and so on. Big part of Dublin, big part of Dublin's history and Dublin's football history. So from our side, we're delighted to be a part of that, of course, and be the next. Maybe someone might be sitting here in 100 years' time, another Gerry Farrell, another Fitzmac Club to football, or another back to the Bogies, whatever it might be. But no, delighted to have you on. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks for having us on that. Cheers.
And so that brings us to the end of episode 5 of the Back to the Bogies podcast. Again, my name is Rory, and Gar, my lovely host today. And again, thanks to the host and to Joe and all the team for allowing us up here and for enjoying our creamy points.
Dry January's over, lads.
Dry January
get back down to the hut.
Yeah.
Support your local pub.
But other than that, make sure to watch some of the previous episodes if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.